At www.spreaker.com, create your own radio show and find thousands of exclusive radio channels.
Hi, this is Kelly. Wake Up with Kelly Hawkins. It is Sunday, the 22nd of July, and thank you for listening. Alright, so hope everyone's having a good day. I've been kind of busy. Today. I know it's Sunday. I didn't go to church. I haven't gone to my new church in a few weeks. Probably about a month even. I think I went once after I joined, and then pastor started preaching about losing your salvation. Like, he was afraid he was going to lose his salvation, and that other people could lose their salvation. And that's something that I don't really believe. I don't think you can, sin and then lose your salvation like that. If that was true, no one would be in heaven. And I don't think God's like that. So that's the reason I haven't been going to that church. I know a lot of people believe that, and that's fine if that's their belief. I'm not here to, tell people what's right and what's wrong as far as religion goes. I'm just saying that wasn't what I believe. And I'm not going to go to a church that preaches it, So other than that, let's see what else. Oh, I went to the baseball game last night. I went to see the Cardinals beat the Cubs. That was fun. Today sucks to be a Cubs fan. I say that like I know what I'm talking about. I took baseball in school, I guess, but I don't really remember it. And so I don't know. I don't know anything about baseball. I saw a triple. Oh, that was pretty cool. Everyone got excited. The funnest part was seeing the stadium full of people and everyone cheering and getting excited. And I wore red because I was going. Because, I don't know, because it's supposed to be Cardinals, right? It was a Cardinals game at the Cardinals Stadium. The person I brought one of my roommates with me. I was a Cardinals fan, so I don't know. It's very unlike me. I've always been very punk rock and very, anti what everyone else is doing. But I wore red, so I don't know. Actually, I didn't even think about it before. It was just seemed the appropriate thing to do. I guess it was. It was my work. It was a work function. It was appropriate. And this morning, I mopped the floor in the kitchen, and I don't know what you would call it. I guess laundry area. Which somebody spilled something sticky on the floor. So I was like, damn it, I'm gonna have to mop this up. And if it was my own place, if I had my own apartment, I'm sure I would have had to mop the kitchen so many times. But before, when this other lady was living here, she used to do it, so I didn't even worry about it. And so I was like, screw it. I'll just go ahead and mop the floor. I didn't think anyone else would, and there was something sticky. And anyways, like I said, if it was my own if I was living in my own place, I would have had to mop the floor a million times by now. Oh well. So the game last night was really fun. Oh my gosh, at the end, I had my roommate take a picture of me, right? In front of the whole baseball diamond and everything. And then, this random guy, and he was really handsome too, walked up and he was like, oh, I want a picture. And so he, stood next to me, put his arm around me, and then had his picture taken with me. It was, so random. It was wild. I liked it. The funny thing was, in the picture, I'm not sure why, but his face was like covered up with, I don't know if it was like, I don't think it was the flash from the phone, but it was just like the way the light, there was like a light pole or something shined on his face. It obscured his face. So I might post it just because his face is obscured. I'll have to look at it. Hopefully my roommate will email it to me, and then I'll get to see if I can post it or not. But it was like it was so weird. It was pretty cool though. And let's see what else. I guess we can listen to more of the Ed the Fed stuff. And the Fed. That's what I was originally going to be doing. Is just showing you this. I had a really good day. It's like my roommate. He hasn't been to the new stadium, so I was there with like a bunch of my work people. But he was like spending the time exploring the stadium. It's like, okay, cool. Which is fine, you know. He didn't have to stay with me or whatever. He was having fun exploring the stadium. That's cool. I'm taking different pictures. And I was with my work people, which wasn't so bad. I was expecting it to be like really suck. I mean, like I was like part excited, but then part I was like, what if this sucks? But I actually had fun. We were in like this VIP room, Ozzy something or other, and there was like this buffet out with like free nachos and sliders, and they had sausage and hot dogs, and the nachos were awesome. I ate a lot of the nachos, even though I don't like eating GMO corn, and like what is it, 98% of corn is GMO. I ate it, and you know, I don't do it very often, so I had like a big plate of nachos. And I had a brownie. These brownies were so good too. Oh my gosh. And I even had a beer, but I had a light beer. But my choices were beer, soda, diet soda, or water. And I didn't want to drink water. And I can't drink soda or diet soda, because that will make me sick. So I was left with beer. So I had a beer, and it actually tasted good. I'm not much of a beer drinker, but I was in such a good mood, even the beer tasted good. I had a light one. I think I said that already. Because usually if I'm drinking, I drink enough. I drink too much, but I didn't. I just had the one because I was driving. And yeah, it was a pretty fun time. I'm really glad I went. Okay, so I'm trying to think, I should probably prepare a little bit better, but I don't have time to prepare that much. And even when I do prepare, I always end up like screwing it up anyways. Oh, my cat. He's digging in my comforter. And he's gonna mess up my comforter. So I'm mad at him. Stop that, kitty. Okay. So let's listen to some more of this and the Fed stuff on the Preacher Jekyll Island. I might do 2 broadcasts today and just finish this because it's really interesting. I really want to hear it, So let's go ahead and do that. All right.
To sponsor the bill, Carter Glass in the House and Senator Robert Owen, who was himself a very successful banker, sponsored the bill, and now it was the Glass-Owen bill. Next, Aldridge and Vanderlip began to give speeches and interviews to newspaper reporters condemning the bill that they had written. They said, this bill will ruin the banks. It'll be terrible for the nation. And of course, by the time that got into the newspapers and the average person read that, they were saying, Golly, the big bankers don't like this bill very much. It must be pretty good. You know, you have to give these fellows credit. They weren't stupid. They didn't get to be where they were by being country bumpkins. They understood mass psychology, they understood politics, and they played their cards exceedingly well. Meanwhile, these same individuals were, out of their own pockets, financing so-called grassroots study clubs that were springing up all over the country, holding public meetings, printing and distributing pamphlets extolling the virtues of the Federal Reserve Act. They gave huge amounts of money to some of our better-known universities in America, established new departments of economics, hand-picked their own people to be the professors to chair those departments. And then those professors began to give speeches and write scholarly essays about how wonderful the Federal Reserve System was. Then, at the insistence of Paul Warburg, they added a few excellent provisions to the bill, provisions which seriously restricted the ability of the Federal Reserve System to create money out of nothing. And Warburg's associates said to him, "Paul, what are you doing? We don't want that in our bill." And his reply was classic. He said, "Relax, fellas, don't you get it? Our object is to get the bill passed. We can fix it up later." It was because of those provisions that they won over the support at long last of William Jennings Bryan, who was the head of the populist movement. He had opposed this bill from the beginning. But when he saw those excellent provisions in there, he said, "Oh, well, I guess now I can support this bill." And with his collapse of opposition, the road was now clear. And everybody was for, almost everyone, except a few lone voices, was for the Federal Reserve. And indeed, they did fix it up later. Since the Federal Reserve Bill was passed, it has been amended over 100 times. And every one of those excellent provisions were long ago removed, and many more have been added, which greatly expanded the power and reach of the Federal Reserve System. And so, with this professional, brilliant strategy and deception, it is no surprise that eventually the public and Congress was solidly for the Federal Reserve System. And the bill was passed on December 22nd, 1913. And the creature from Jekyll Island finally moved into Washington, D.C. I'd like to focus for a moment on what are the objectives of the Federal Reserve System, because, you know, we're told that the purpose of the Fed is to stabilize the economy and to put an end to chaotic banking. One of the more popular textbooks used in our colleges and junior colleges today is a textbook on economics written by Paul Samuelson. And here's what he says. He says the Federal Reserve sprang from the panic of 1907 with its alarming epidemic of bank failures. The country was fed up once and for all with the anarchy of unstable private banking. Well, that's what he said. That's what the students are learning. Let's not challenge that for the moment. Let's just take it at face value, because this is the official doctrine, isn't it? The purpose of the Fed is to stabilize the economy and to protect the people. That's why they're raising our interest rates right now. That's what Greenspan says. Why is he doing this? To help people, right? To stabilize the economy so we won't have massive inflation. It's for you folks that he's doing this. See? That's what he says. And if you're trying to figure it out on the basis of these official pronouncements, you'll never get it. Let's just take this official pronouncement at face value for a moment and see how well it's doing. Let's give it a report card. Since the Federal Reserve was created, it has presided over the crashes of 1921 and 1929, the Great Depression of 29 through 39, recessions in the years 53, 57, 69, 75, and 81, A stock market Black Monday in '87. We all know that corporate debt is soaring. Personal debt is greater than ever. Both business and personal bankruptcies are at an all-time high. Banks and savings and loan associations have failed in larger numbers than ever before. Interest on the national debt is consuming half of our tax dollars. Heavy industry has all been but replaced by overseas competitors. We're facing an international trade deficit for the first time in our history. 75% of downtown Los Angeles and other metropolitan areas is now owned by foreigners, and over half of the nation now officially is in a state of recession. Now that's the report card of the Federal Reserve System after 80 years of stabilizing our economy. I don't think it's even controversial to say that it has failed to meet its stated objectives. The only controversial issue is, why has it failed? And my answer is, because those have never been its true objectives. What are its true objectives? Well, what are the objectives of any cartel? To enhance the profit margins of the members of the cartel and to stabilize their position in the market. If we hold that in mind, now we get a different picture folding before us. Now they're not failing at all. They're succeeding. There were three objectives that the bankers had, the ones on Jekyll Island. They had three objectives in 1910 through 1913 that they wanted the Federal Reserve System to accomplish for them, and they were very verbose on the topic. And here they are. They said first they wanted to stop the erosion of their power away from New York. That's right. Exactly the opposite of what the Federal Reserve System was supposed to accomplish. That's what they wanted. This is a good point to mention that when we talk about the cartel, I'm not talking about the small banks that are struggling for survival under the Federal Reserve System. Remember, John D. Rockefeller said competition is a sin. And one of the purposes of the cartel was to put a check on the competition from these new banks, keep them in their place, eliminate them if possible, and to do so through regulation, setting up conditions that the big banks could afford to handle, but the small banks could not handle. So I'm not talking about your local banker now. I'm talking about the New York cartel. That was objective number one. Objective number two was to reverse the trend of what they call private capital formation. Now that's banker language for a trend in which individuals or businesses use their own savings for something instead of going to the bank and borrowing money for it. At the turn of the century, there was a trend toward private capital formation, in business particularly. Businesses were holding back a certain portion of their dividends each quarter, putting that money into a sinking fund, and then as the capital formed, or as they saved more and more money, then they used their own savings to build a new factory or to launch a research and development project or whatever. And the banks were extremely concerned over this trend. They wanted to entice businesses back into the banks to borrow money. And they knew that the only way to do that is to lower interest rates. And you may say, well, why didn't they just lower interest rates? Because you're thinking in terms of today, not then. Today it's easy if you're the Federal Reserve System to lower interest rates because they have the lever to move it either way, up or down, totally within their control. But in 1913, there was no lever because the money in those days was backed by gold and silver. And you can't hook a lever onto that kind of money. Under those conditions, interest rates are the result of the natural forces of supply and demand. People cannot control it. I mean, individuals or committees cannot control it. Millions of people interacting in freedom control it, supply and demand. But it's not subject to political control. And they knew that the only way that they could get people into the banks is to artificially depress the natural interest rate. How do you do that? They said that the answer was through a flexible currency. They said what the nation needed was a flexible currency to meet the demands of industry. Well, what is a flexible currency? It's not this stuff that bends. You need a dictionary to understand some of these things. A flexible currency, ladies and gentlemen, is money made out of nothing. That's what that means. Now, you see, the trick is not too complicated. If you can create money out of nothing, you don't have to charge an awful lot of interest on it to show a profit. So, with a flexible currency, they could lower the interest rates below the natural level, still make plenty of profit on it, and entice the businessmen back into the banks. So the goal was a flexible currency. That was objective number 2, and objective number 3 was to pass on the inevitable losses of the banks, pass them on to the taxpayers in the name of protecting the people. Now, those are the true objectives of the Federal Reserve. Let's now issue another report card and see how well it did. Did it keep control with the larger banks in New York? And the answer is yes. We have big banks in the West and in the South, but they are nothing compared to these mega banks in New York, which stride the world with offices in Peking and Moscow and Africa, everywhere. The big banks continue to dominate. It gets an A on its report card for retaining control in New York. What about reversing the trend toward private capital formation? Boy, did it ever. Interest rates have been pushed down over periods of time. They're so attractive that individuals and corporations thought they were crazy not to take advantage of those low interest rates. Why save your money? That's stupid. So they were all enticed into the banks because of a flexible currency. Then, of course, they get loaned up to the eyebrows and something happens in the economy and you can't service your debt anymore, you go bankrupt. Right now, there are many corporations and individuals just hanging in there by the skin of their teeth because they're trying to service their debt. And it's an amazing fact that many of these large corporations are now sending more money every quarter to the banks as interest payments than they send to the stockholders as dividends. Just think about that. The banks who made the money out of nothing are making more money out of large segments of our industry than the people who worked for their money, saved their money, invested their money, risked their money to purchase ownership shares in those corporations. And the Federal Reserve System gets an A on its report card because, indeed, with flexible currency, it reversed the trend toward private capital formation. Were they able to pass along their losses to the taxpayer in the name of protecting the people? Maybe you missed that part of it, but it's called bailout. The game called bailout. It is played something like this. Whenever one of the large banks gets into trouble because someone it has loaned money to, either a big corporation or a third world country, can no longer pay its debt, so the bank is in trouble. It goes to Congress, and it carefully explains to Congress that it must bail out that corporation or that third world country, because otherwise it's going to hurt the people of America. If that venerable corporation is allowed to fold, look at how many thousands of jobs will be lost. People would be put on welfare. They'll be out of work, and that'll hurt the people. If that country down in South America cannot pay its loan, Uncle Sam better pay it for him, because otherwise the venerable bank in New York will have to write the loan off of its books, and then technically it'll be bankrupt. It may have to close its doors. It would collapse. And look at the thousands of people who have money in that bank who would be hurt by that. And who knows, that bank is such a big bank, if it fell, it might be the first domino, causing all the other banks to fall. And we could have a major recession or depression on our hands, and look how the people of America would suffer. And so so Congress dutifully runs to the front and says, yes, yes, we don't want any of that to happen. And they vote the funds to guarantee the loans, or in some cases to make outright payments to keep that river of interest payments going to the banks. Not the small banks, the big banks. Here are some of the games you may have missed. Penn Central Railroad was bailed out in 1970. Lockheed Corporation also in 1970. Commonwealth Bank of Detroit in 1972. New York City in 1975. Chrysler Corporation in 1978. First Pennsylvania Bank in 1980. Continental Illinois, the largest of the banks so far, in 1982. And all of those countries in the third world who can no longer make their interest payments are now making their payments because they got the money from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which got it from the Federal Reserve System, which got it from you and me through the Mandrake mechanism. And my final topic before I reach the conclusion is one that I think you'll find interesting, and that is usury. In the old days, biblical times, usury was defined as interest on a loan.
Alright, so let's go ahead and pause it there. There's still over 15 minutes left of the YouTube. So I'm going to go ahead and log off of Spreaker, and then I'm going to, just basically end this broadcast, and then come right back and start a new one, and we can finish this up. I really didn't know that there were all those bailouts back in the 80s. I was like, wow, he's talking about bailouts, and this is a lecture from, 1998? But apparently there are a lot of bailouts back in the 80s, too. Scary thought. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this broadcast and start another one. So just hold on there. I'll be right back.